Hi, I'm Dan Kubisky with the Society of Professional Journalists International Community. Last year, Hong Kong Journalists Association and a number of other independent journalism institutions faced serious investigations by the Hong Kong Inland Revenue Department, basically the tax office. Concerns were raised at the time that the Hong Kong government was targeting these organizations because of their independence from government control or influence. Many of the cases were eventually settled. However, in late April of this year, the Hong Kong Journalist Association was told it owed the equivalent of about 93,000 US dollars. This amount was more than double the taxes the HKJA paid in prepaid taxes in the past. So, to talk with us about that and what's going on is the chair of the HKJA, Selena Cheng. Selena, welcome back.
Hi, Dan. You're correct to point out that it's a prepaid tax, meaning that they haven't actually found us to be guilty of owing anything yet. It's common for tax officers to withhold a certain sum of money before they even start a tax audit.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is not they're not saying you're in arrears or there's any other tax issue. But the amount you raised the issue of the amount. It's so much higher than previous years. What's their argument for that, and what's your argument against it?
Actually, our tax audit is ongoing. The government's position is that we do owe them something. We dispute the legality of whether union income is considered profits, business profits, and would be taxable for profits tax. Um, the withholding amount that we're charged is basically based on nothing. It's an estimation that the government imposes on the taxpayer, and the amount for this year imposed for 6 years prior, the year of 2019 and 2020, the financial year was around 100,000 US dollar, just under it. Because it's not based on any formula or actual income or any evidence, there's basically no real way we can dispute it effectively. And that was the same of the amount that was charged of us around 3 years, almost 3 years ago. And so the taxpayer must pay it before a 1 month deadline. And they could also try to have it paid in the form of tax certificates, which is not very much different, except if the amount is eventually returned to them at the end of an audit, then they could be paid a little bit of interest. So it's all this discretionary maneuvering on the part of the government, which is uh, why its weaponization is so effective when used inappropriately or when this procedure is abused.
You use the term weaponization of the situation. The Hong Kong government, for a number of years, really seems to have been fixated on the Journalist Association. We've had the years of tax issues. There's been talk that maybe you're not even allowed to be legitimately exist. They question your membership. What is this fixation they have on you?
We still legitimately exist. Strangely, we're still legally registered as a labor union. The union authority had some questions for us, but never completed its investigation or passed on any finding. What we face is continuous harassment, verbal or administrative, from the government. This only happened after the 2019 protests, where a lot of reporters faced direct violence from police when they're reporting on what happened in the city when millions of people took to the streets to march for their civil rights. Of course, there were more violent protests and chaos, and some reporters got hurt by protesters' activities as well. But overall, Hong Kong has been clamping down on press freedom, really restricting the flow of information that's available, especially on matters of public accountability. So our union has always spoken out about these problems and expressed our worries and tried to convince the government that it's really going to only hurt themselves as well as people of Hong Kong. And so they really, really dislike that we did not come to heel and be aligned with official narratives or official values. And that's fundamentally why we're facing all these now.
Now, you mentioned the riot and the demonstrations of 2019. And of course, that led to the infamous security laws that have since come into place, some imposed by Beijing and some enacted within Hong Kong. Those laws and the actions of the government seem to have had an impact on the latest ratings of Hong Kong for press freedom in the Reporters Without Borders index. I mean, Hong Kong dropped almost 70 points in just 1 year. Would you
Yeah.
care to comment about not only the what Reporters Without Borders decision, but also the how the Hong Kong government has reacted to it, and how are journalists in Hong Kong reacting to it, to this new index?
Yeah. The index is a ranking, right, relative to other jurisdictions, and it's remained the same this year as the last. And I think this is consistent, broadly consistent with my own observations, is that there was no significant improvement in Hong Kong's press freedom environment, and it hovers around a low level. This ranking is also consistent with our union's press freedom index, which polls the sentiments among the journalist industry and amongst the public on that matter in terms of a point system over 100 points. So I think in reality, there's been some further erosion that are hard to reflect in an index or in a survey, because it's not just used against journalists, it's the consistent harassment against all industries of expression, in theater, in music, in filmmaking, and in the publishing industry. So they face very similar administrative harassment than we do. And the National Security Police, you mentioned the law, they also introduced new regulations and sub-regulations to further restrict what people are allowed to do in terms of expression, but also what they are empowered to do in an expansion of the law. So notably, for mobile cell phone devices, passwords, police is now empowered to request for their passwords. People would have no choice but to comply or face an additional prison sentence. And another case in point is that the police has been using a gag order against a lot of people. They would make requests with people or make inquiries with people, and as soon as the interaction starts, they would cite a part of the law that prevents them from disclosing to anyone that they've been approached by National Security Police. So we do hear that happening quite frequently, but the media has not been able to report on it due to the sensitive nature of these interactions. And that's how these powers get continuously expanded, and the space for press freedom and the freedom of expression continuously shrinks in Hong Kong.
situations where I believe a representative from Reporters Without Borders was denied entry into Hong Kong. Reporters who were hoping to be assigned to Hong Kong were denied entry. Journalists coming into Hong Kong just for a short period of time were denied entry. Uh, how much more prevalent is this becoming? And is there anything that can be done about that?
Yeah. I think just in the past year, I might have heard of or been approached by half a dozen people who had questions about their visas, either because they were not approved in a quite a lengthy period of time for several months, or it was denied, or they were afraid that it would be denied, so they withdrew their application. So it's really, I guess, like any immigration process, it's really quite a black box. And because these individuals are usually not Hong Kong permanent residents, so they're not entitled to enter Hong Kong to work as a journalist or as any member of any profession, and they can't really appeal that decision. Um, One very notable example that happened in November but came to light recently was a French TV documentary director who was rejected at the border, and then faced very serious harassment back home. He worked for French television, France Television, the public broadcaster, and the company received threats and were targeted and cyber hacking, etc. Just because this guy tried to enter Hong Kong to do a documentary about the situation here. And his camera person was allowed in, but when he was in the territory, he was tailed and followed by unknown people during the whole way. So I believe some parts of the filming could not be completed in Hong Kong due to these security concerns. So these are all to do with border crossing. And a lot more people, even if they were not doing any sensitive stories on Hong Kong, face extra scrutiny in terms of visa. What the actual process is that all the visa applicants would receive, in addition to their normal immigration papers, a set of questions. Sometimes they can be very intrusive and intimate. For example, one question I've seen is, could you please list out all the people you know and contact in Hong Kong? So that's a very broad question. It could include your colleagues, your boss, your neighbors, other friends, romantic partners, etc. Right? And not just who you know, but please give us your contact information, the immigration authorities request. Sometimes reporters also get questions about their opinion of past social media posts. Some people might have posted, more or less liberally, their political opinion or their opinion about the 2019 protests, and those content were put to them for their opinion 6 years later, for a job that's entirely unrelated. So these make people anxious, because not just because whether or not they'll be given a visa. A lot of these reporters have set up a life in Hong Kong. Bloomberg reporter who was denied entry last year, she was pregnant, heavily pregnant. She was ready to set up family, have her roots here permanently, but she was not given a chance. And other people had to leave because they had to consider their spouses' jobs, whether their spouses also have permanent residency or are able to stay in Hong Kong, and had to relocate their entire family, spouse and children all together. It's entirely, I think this is very unfair on them, and it's also a huge burden on the circle of people who are not really in this profession but had to deal with the outcome as a result. Interestingly, these questions are very, the way they're asked or the language in which they're asked, usually in English, has some differences with normal Hong Kong bureaucratic English. And even the paper it comes in on is different to the immigration department's own stationery. But of course, the reporters or the visa applicant are not told where these visa applications come from. They're just handed those papers from the immigration authorities. So these are very peculiar details I've noticed about the process. I wish there was a bit more clarity on, for example, what's the normal length of visa applications these days, what's considered, a likely green light or a likely red light, so people can at least plan their lives around it a little bit more.
This has been the thing that a lot of people have talked about for a number of years now, is that fuzzy line. There's no bright red line that if you know you cross this, you're going to be in trouble. It's always it's a fungible, it's a movable line in some cases, and people don't know they've crossed it
Yeah,
until they get the
that's
notice.
exactly how state censorship works, because there's so much you could express and say and write that the authorities don't like. It's just easier for them to keep it vague, and then people will, keep in line themselves and try to police themselves, rather than, being sanctioned by the law directly. There were questions about this, well, rather discussions about this recently, because there was a book that was considered banned, and it wasn't considered banned until the government raided and arrested a small bookstore owner. And the Security Bureau chief very clearly stated that, they shouldn't give out a list of banned books for people to know which books are legal, which aren't. So there's really no way to know. And I saw some people online quite aptly pointed out that, for example, the police also enforces the law on the use of certain illegal drugs. And those are very clearly listed as dangerous substances or lists of different categories. How are people supposed to know what's illegal if you never list them out? So yeah, that's the dangers of any law restricting speech and opinion. And by design, they're meant to make people afraid and self-censor.
Right.
And it's very, very hard for anyone operating in industries of expression to try to fight against those feelings of self-censorship.
Talked about how the pressure is coming from a variety of directions on journalists and press and on freedom of expression. I just want to circle back to where we started with the tax uh, situation. Do you feel in some cases that the use of the tax law in Hong Kong is being used as just one other form of pressure against independent journalists and independent journalism in the territories?
Yeah, absolutely. It's well known that reporters in Hong Kong don't make a lot of money, unfortunately, proportionately way less than our peers in Western countries in the UK or the US. And a lot of small media struggle. They all want to do excellent work, and they do outstanding work for public interest. And for that reason, they feel like they can't charge people for crucial information about their own interests. Or they don't want to put out paywalls, etc., and rely entirely on a sort of free membership type of model. And yeah, that just makes the landscape very difficult for them, because they don't have enough money to run their own business to start with, or to run their own organizations to start with. And now, additionally, they're facing unfair tax audits. And I think one of the most tricky aspects is that when the government audits an individual, the individual had no legal obligation to keep receipts of the past 6 or 7 years covered by the audit, unlike for companies, right? So when all of a sudden you're slapped with an audit, you're left with not much to defend yourself with. And the onus of proof is on the taxpayer, not on the government. So it's up to us to prove ourselves that we're innocent rather than guilty. So yeah, this really puts a lot of stress and pressure on media organizations and on journalists. They have to handle the accounting, the bookkeeping. We all know how not all journalists are excellent at math and numbers. And they may have to spend extra on, re-accounting their books or finding someone to do it right now. And they have to spend the time, they have to worry about it, they have to worry about cash flow. And it's, yeah, one of the reporters, he's the founder of one of the small media. He got so anxious about all this. The tax office letters kept coming, multiple of them. He stopped opening those letters in because he was anxious and was avoiding them. And ultimately, he missed some deadlines to pay those prepayment amounts, and his bank account got frozen. So it's really a snowball that keeps on rolling. And that's why us as a union, we try our best to help them whenever possible, and just, let them know that there are others facing the same thing. We could share experience, share lessons learned, share tips, and just exchange information in that small community is immensely helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Um, is there anything else you'd like to any other comments you'd like to make on some of the areas that we've talked about, or something else, just as we wind this up, if there's any final comments?
Yeah. Um, I think for journalists anywhere, press freedom has been in decline globally, maybe with the exception, hopefully, of Hungary, now that they have a new prime minister that seems to have less of an authoritarian penchant. Um, it's really important to hold the line at all times, not given to power. I think it's very common for example, journalists in the business and financial press to defer to what powerful people say or what rich people say. It's really important to, know where we stand and report with integrity, report and operate with integrity at all times, so that our institutions remain as intact as possible when the challenge comes. Um, yeah, and always speak up for our peers who are also facing increasing restrictions in other industries of expression, because they will face exactly the same thing as we do. And when something happens to them, it will soon happen to journalists as well.
That was just a perfect closing to this discussion. We need to show solidarity among not only ourselves within our individual countries, but also with journalists around the world, but also others who are engaged in expression and in telling stories. They may be artists, they may be authors, and they may be lowly paid, ink-stained wretches like myself. Yeah. So thank you very much. Selena Cheng, Chair of the Hong Kong Journalism Association, thank you very much for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you, Dan.